Hi, this is Joe with C&J Goods, and here are all the things you need to make Experiment 62 Sticks, aka Stitch. So I've got a few extra things than I normally do with the project because we're using vegtan today. I have paints over here, all the different colors I'm going to need to mix, and a satin finisher. I have black thread. I've got a brush, of course, to work everything in a little palette. I have my hole punch, the leather, the pattern. I also have a color chart that I made this time. I have the Verify square ready to measure and make sure my print came out the right size. Scissors, Sharpie, X-Acto, needles. And then here are my optional tools. I've got a skiver, a folder for beveling, a beveler itself, a lighter, and super glue. And these are just polish off the knots, so you probably will want those anyway. Alright, let's get started. So quick note about the leather itself. This is a vegtan. It is 2 to 3 ounces thick. It's got a little bit of a sunburn here, so I'm definitely painting it versus dyeing it because the color would be uneven otherwise. I have a little cheat sheet for all my colors that I'll be matching later when I go to paint. And I have my pattern, which is where you have to start. Now, I've given a nice big full all the pieces in one print. You don't have to cut everything out if you are like me and you like to cut the pieces out ahead of time. Some people like to take a thin piece of masking tape and use that to put things down onto the leather and then punch all the holes through and then cut it out. I prefer to cut out, trace on the reverse with a Sharpie, and then I'll worry about punching holes afterwards. So as always, I have my 2-inch Verify square to make sure your printer settings are correct. I'm using my tiny rule today. So I know that this is square. I'm only gonna cut out these pieces here today because I'm gonna flip some stuff over and use it twice to copy the pattern. But because Stitch has chips out of each of his ears, I am going to cut the earpieces separately. So another quick note about the pattern is I have printed this so that if you want to stick it right down, these are oriented the right way for the smooth side. So if you look at my demo here, you'll see the chip is high out of this ear, and that's this side, and the chip is low out of that ear, which is on this side. So when I go to trace these onto my leather, I'm actually gonna have to flip over the pattern pieces and trace them on that way to make sure that they're oriented properly when I go to cut things out. You can sit here and try to Tetris everything on in any way, shape, or form as tight as you feel comfortable doing. Again, make sure you are comfortable with how tight you put things down. I'm probably going to get a little tighter than most, but then again, I am using an X-Acto knife rather than scissors, so I have a lot of fine point control with it. This is going to get sandwiched like this because it's this ear, and I want to make sure that this is going to be fuzzy side on the inside. So actually I'm going to have to trace it this way. So I was wrong earlier when I said that this is printed so you can put it right down on the piece. I will swap that pattern once I have finished shooting this video. I'll edit the pattern for you guys. something funky here. This is such a small piece, and I only have a particular type of skiver. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to punch the holes, skive it so that the top here tapers to thin down here by the tip of the nose. And I want to do that while I have enough things to grip it by. I could use a pair of pliers, I suppose, to hold it, but that could mark the leather just because of the compression. So I'm just going to leave this little bit on here and try that out and see if it works. So I like to skive on a piece of glass tile. Okay, that's all there. And I have one of these skivers. Some people use a half moon blade. I have some control with this, but you can see why I need room to work. If I'd cut this out, I'd be working right there. So having a longer piece of leather as a tail generally helps. I am going to punch these big holes using a larger punch. Now, if you don't have a big punch, you can absolutely use a smaller one and work your way around, do a couple punches and then clean up that hole. If you have the one punch, go ahead and use it. It makes for a much nicer finished looking hole. And for these two guys, I'm going to use the biggest hole on my rotary punch. Now with these little guys, this is going to be kind of hard to see. I'll do the best I can here. I'm going to cut this on this side, and I'm going to flip it over, find that point, and cut it on this side. That way I know that the points match up, and I'm going to try not to bevel as I cut. If you have a diamond punch or an awl, feel free to use that. Just use the marked holes. If you have a multiple diamond punch, you know, one that looks like a fork, these are spaced a little funky because of the curves. Please just follow the lines that I've got. It'll go together better. Alright, here are all my holes punched and my pieces are together. That's one side of the face and the other. There's the inside and the teeth. There's each ear, the nose, and the face. I'm gonna do another piece of skiving, I've decided. The ears are gonna get folded like this together. And it's very hard to bend the vegtan. So I'm gonna go ahead and make this bit right in here slimmer so that it tapers from this spot to the tip. And while that won't make it too easy to bend, I might also put a little bit of a skiving in here. So I'm gonna get the tool out again. Pick up the edges of the ears. They run a little bit smoother. I really need to sharpen this bit better. So I'm taking the tool and I'm basically making it thinner from this point down to the tip. I'm not going too extreme, but I just wanted to make the ears a little bit slender looking. And that just gives it a nice optical illusion of the ears being more transparent. Another spot I'm going to bevel is on the outside here, because I know this edge is going to touch the face pieces. I'd rather have that thick edge visible and thin it out. So if you look on this, see how that's got a nice thick edge? I'm going to do it so it looks more like my bunny here, where it just sort of transitions a little bit smoother. And this is just water from the tap. And I'm gonna run my finger along the edge here. You can see it's dark there. Just get a little water on these parts. I don't want to get too much on because I don't want to wait forever for this stuff to dry. And then I'm gonna burnish. So just rubbing here, because this is where the bevel is. I've already made it smoother so that you can't see these little bits of fiber sticking up. Alright, my leather has finally dried, so I can get to painting. I'm going to try to match relatively closely the colors that I have for Stitch. And here's a couple of, that tells me which part is which. I've got the light blue for the inner eye, the blue for the body, the inside ear is kind of a lavender. I'm going to try to aim for this maroon for the inside. And then I'm going to try to get that nose pretty close to navy. So before I get crazy painting, I'm going to take this little tool, which I use for putting grooves in for stitching. It looks a little bit like this. So it's pulled up a stripe of the leather there. You can see it. I'm going to do that on the nose, so that when I sew the nose on, the thread looks more like his nostrils. So I'm going to do two colors on this piece, and I'm going to use this seam line as a guide. The teeth are going to be white, and this part here is going to be the eye blue, which is a lighter blue. And I'm going to just mix it fresh. The acrylic finisher. I've got my tray cleaned out nice and clean. This stuff is really watery. You can sort of see that it sloshes around pretty easily in there. It doesn't take much. You really don't want to put a ton of coats on. That's really all I need. If you put too many coats on, it starts to get milky. So you start to see that there's a coat there. And you just want to be gentle, get a little bit on the brush, and go over. See that little puddle there? We want to avoid having too much on the brush and have that get milky. So the nose is going to go point down. This is the edge of the face. This is the back of the head here. I'm going to run this through in a slightly unusual pattern. Just a little extra insurance to make sure that knot doesn't go anywhere. Okay, so I know that this chip goes into his port side, left. His left, not my left. So that's gonna go on the side with the eye facing the left, and it's gonna get sewn like that. Over the top so it lines up in here. And I'm going to do a double stitch here to keep it in place. It's a little extra security. So this is the corner of this piece, and this is a corner by the nose. I'm gonna do this loop between here and here twice. I'm gonna use this needle that I just grabbed for it. And go through twice there. Then I'm gonna go through this last hole twice as well. So one way and one the other. I'm going to tie a double knot behind this last tooth and use a little bit of super glue in order to bind it in place. And there we have it, experiment 626. He's all finished. If you want to turn it into a keychain or a dongle, I recommend punching a hole back here, and maybe if you've got the tools, go ahead and put a grommet on there or an eyelet, just so that the leather doesn't get torn with the use of keys. But other than that, he looks pretty cute, doesn't he?